Nerd Morning, everyone. My name is Jeremy, and today on the Nerd Morning Show, we're going to be talking about The Eye of the World, Robert Jordan's first book in the Wheel of Time series. Now, this series is absolutely amazing. I cannot emphasize enough how much I love these books. There is 14 books in the main series, and including the prequel, there's 15 books, and they are all absolutely fantastic. In fact, this is being optioned currently as a Amazon series. So in 2019, it was put into production, and in 2021, this year, it's supposed to actually air. Now, with COVID and things like that, the timeline is a little bit less firm than we were hoping it to be, but it seems to be moving forward. Now, Amazon seems to be wanting to be having a big blockbuster style show like Game of Thrones. Now, this is honestly a reasonable comparison because the world inside of the Wheel of Time series is so big and so epic. And similarly with the Game of Thrones, how there's multiple different characters in different places that you follow along, that occurs inside of the Wheel of Time as well. The Eye of the World is, again, the book one, and I'm going to initially start out talking some spoiler-free stuff, and then we might dig in a little bit more in detail about this particular book. And if you guys are excited about this review and are looking forward to more stuff with Wheel of Time, I'm planning on doing more books throughout the year from this series. So the Wheel of Time is in a world that's a fantasy world. There is some reasonable amount of development inside of the culture, but it's kind of in that medieval type flavor that we see in stories like Sword of Shannara and Lord of the Rings, which honestly are two great books to compare because this particular story in book one has a major journey type feel and element to it, like Lord of the Rings or Sword of Shannara have. We get to explore a bit of this world. We see the traveling people, the Tinkers. We get to see some of these different cities, cities that will become significant later in the books. We get to see royalty, we get to see the borderlands, we get to see so much of this world, and we continue to explore more and more as these kids grow up to adults and as they find and seize all of their various powers, as it were, as they develop as heroic, dynamic, amazing characters. In this, we have a few characters, Rand, Perrin, and Mat, who are these boys from the Two Rivers, and there is this special being, Moiraine, who goes in there and is kind of like this Gandalf character. And she goes in there, says, you guys need to go off on this journey with me. And essentially they head off on this grand adventure. Now, there is, obviously, like I said, some real parallels there with some of these other stories that you may know and love. The Wheel of Time series with that name, you're kind of like, Wheel of Time? What is this book series about? The Wheel of Time is essentially a analogy for how the world operates. They talk about how there's a spinning wheel, as it were, that threads the patterns of reality, and these threads are people's lives, and it makes this tapestry, which is the universe. And I think that that is extremely poetic and really kind of cool. And with this wheel that is spinning and is building this pattern, which is the world and the universe, and people are the threads of that. They talk about how there's this great design that's being created, and they talk about how there are certain individuals who are instrumental in guiding the pattern or are being used by the pattern to create the pattern itself. And there's this give and take about like freedom of choice versus destiny, and they explore some of those ideas with this. But these individuals that are like destined to have a great influence on the universe and the wheel and the pattern, they call these individuals Ta'veren. And with Moiraine, she finds that there are three individuals here in this story that are going to help shape the pattern, and the pattern is going to be shaped around them. They have this give and take in this epic scale where most people have their lives just being filled in and being a part of the great tapestry, which is life. Now, Rand, Perrin, and Mat are those lucky, unlucky individuals, and so you have these characters that are essentially tapped on the shoulder of destiny and are being pushed off into this grand adventure. Now, I've mentioned three boys here, and so people might be thinking, oh, is this just another boys going off and having a grand adventure? This really isn't. I mean, there is that definitely, but there are really, really strong female characters with Wgwene, Nynaeve, Moiraine, all of these individuals in this book. And as the story continues, there's actually more representation in the female perspective on many of the different books than there is even the male perspective. And there's ultimately a really good balance between these as we kind of split into different groups and different stories, and their stories interweave and interconnect. Now that means this is a big, big epic series and big, big epic story with multiple perspectives and different tales as they all interconnect and weave together. To me, that is my absolute favorite type of story. I love these big, grand epics, but this could be a little big or overwhelming for some readers, and I think that's understandable. But for people who like big epic stories, if you like things like Sword of Shannara, Lord of the Rings, Brandon Sanderson, and his Cosmere universe, and many other of these bigger stories, this story and series is totally right up your alley. So let's talk a little bit about some of these characters and some of the magic inside of this universe. So let's start off with Moiraine. Now Moiraine is what they call an Aes Sedai, and she has the capacity to use the magic of this universe. And essentially there are two groups of magic that there is that they can tap into, and there's the male source of the power and the female source of the power. But in this world, the male source of the power has been tainted and is no longer safe to use, and anybody who uses that power goes crazy. And so men are feared and are essentially tried to be stopped if they find that they're able to use the male source of the power. Moiraine is on that female side, and she has full access to being able to use the power, and in fact, the Aes Sedai, these female magic wielders, are either feared, loved, put in stories or legend, and they are like the great wizards, as it were, for this universe. And so she is essentially put in kind of that Gandalf-like role for this as she goes into the two rivers and interacts with these people. Now I've kind of hit some non-spoiler parts here, kind of setting up and getting into what this world looks like and what to expect. I'm going to be starting to dive into things that are a little bit more spoiler driven in this story. So if you guys are looking at, is this a good book for me or not? My recommendation is yes, I really think that you guys should be checking this book out, particularly if you guys are excited about the Amazon series and things like that as it's moving forward and probably going to be a bigger part of pop culture here in the future because of that show. Now, if you guys are wanting to have more spoilers or have read the book, really excited about kind of some of my thoughts, diving a deep farther into this, definitely stick around. We're going to be going in more detail about some of these characters and some of this stuff. So Rand is an amazing character. I think he's super, super dynamic. And in this book, we have an awesome perspective of an individual who wants to be normal, wants to have a regular life. He's a shepherd, which is a major savior trope that is used in storytelling. I've seen this with stories from like Jim Butcher's, his fantasy series. Obviously that parallels to the type of analogies and use that are used in the Bible. And Rand, being this savior-like character, is a big interesting thing that they tie him in as a shepherd. But some of his big desires are, going and maybe dating and then marrying Egwene and moving forward with his normal pastoral type life. And obviously, when they are attacked and have to escape to save the two rivers, that is disrupted. And obviously, moving forward, he has to grow and change. And I really like his character. Also, I love that we have a redheaded hero. There are not a ton of male redhead heroes in pop culture, in literature. I don't get to see that as often. And as a redhead, it means a lot to me to have a redheaded hero. I'm not exceptionally tall like he is, but I still I think it'd be awesome to cosplay as Rand, and I think that would be really, really fun. Anyways, he's an awesome character. Perrin is really, really cool. He's different. He's not just he's tall, but he's a bigger guy, strong because he's this blacksmith, and I guess blacksmith apprentice, and he has this type of belief that he's bigger and stronger than everyone, and so he tries really hard to compensate that because he's such a kind, sweet-hearted soul. And seeing that blend is, I think, an awesome character because you built in this conflict just simply by him being who he is. And that's, again, really lovable, and him having this connection with the wolves and all of the things that they build out and start to explore in this volume is awesome. And I think a really cool element for him. And I know a lot of people, he's their favorite because of his connection to the wolves, and because of how big and strong and heroic and kind he is. The next out of the trio of boys from the Two Rivers is Mat Cauthon, and Mat is so much fun. He is this snarky troublemaker, lovable individual who has tremendous luck throughout his life, and that's so fun and interesting because has this capacity to be very good at what he does. And that's just something that for a character and a character development is really, really fun. Moving on with Egwene. Egwene is this stowaway character for this grand traveling adventure, and Egwene, she finds out that she has the capacity to use the magic and that's in this universe, and is really excited about that because even while she was in the Two Rivers, she was an outsider in her perspective of wanting to go outside and see the world, and she finally gets this opportunity and she seizes on it as these boys are supposed to go and escape, to join in with that group and to move on to this adventure. And I love how she's this person who's going to just seize onto her destiny, seize onto this adventure and experience. I think that makes her a very likable character. Nynaeve is the opposite. She wants to stick around. She wants to protect the Two Rivers, and she wants to protect the people who she feels she has responsibility for. She is known as the Wisdom, which is kind of like the female leader of the community, but also the doctor and healer and overall wise woman for their community, which I think is interesting how they have this male leadership group and this female leadership group, and they both have these big, big roles inside of their culture and society. I just think that's really cool. Anyways, Nynaeve is kind of a prickly person. She is quick to snap at people and is ultimately quite intimidating for a lot of individuals. And here we see her not wanting to leave, wanting to go and rescue all of these stolen children, as she sees it, and ultimately gets brought in and dragged into this adventure. Someone I haven't mentioned yet who is so worth talking about is Lan. Lan is the warder for Moiraine. So it's this male companion for these female Aes Sedais, and they are essentially the bodyguards of these magic wielders. He's this extremely talented warrior, and he has such great capacity to fight and all of those types of things, but he also has this like ancient destiny that's placed upon him because he is of a noble line of a destroyed kingdom, and his story is just so powerful and something we don't really get to explore very much throughout the series. And he's a character that if I were to have a story focus all around, I would love more stories with Al'Lan Mandragoran because he is so dynamic to me. So those are kind of the main characters. There are big characters that weave in and out, and characters that are introduced in this book that become a bigger deal in the future. Adding into kind of my overall feels of this book is the pacing is, I think, wonderful. It's maybe a little bit slower than a fast-paced book that is supposed to be a single one-and-done book because it's doing a lot of work and setting things up. But really, even considering that, I think that this book just keeps on going and it keeps my attention and my interest really, really well. It also has awesome characters that it chooses to explore and talk about, and there are multiple perspectives as the story in this one splits into 3 groups and then also returns those groups together. And this is a wonderful thing for this, as it really delves into the pacing and the structure of the whole series altogether. So there you have it, guys. That's kind of my thoughts and review of the first book of The Wheel of Time. I love this book so much. I don't think I can really emphasize that enough. Drop down your comments below. Is this a series that you guys have read? Is this a series that you guys are excited about reading? Put those in the comments below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you guys next time.